turn the time over to the judges right now.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Well, good morning again, Indiana. It's nice to see you. Glad you made it this far. I'm amazed that I made it this far, so here we are. It'll be fun, right? Right. So we got together this morning and we decided that we liked question 2, so that's the one we'll ask. But first, we'll do some introductions. My name is Jack Barlow, and I'm still a professor of politics at Juniata College.
I'm reading the canon. I haven't seen you guys before. I was doing Unit 3 on Friday and Saturday, but I'm thrilled to death to be with these two very, very knowledgeable gentlemen and to hear from you. Glad to be here.
I'm Tim Moore from UW-Madison Center for the Study of the American Constitution. It's great to be here.
And would you all introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
Hello, hello. We are Unit 2 from Team Indiana, from Fishers High School in Fishers, Indiana. I'm a senior this year, and next year I will be attending the University of Colorado Boulder. Oh, my name's Abby, by the way. I'm sorry, I forgot that. My name's Abby. I will be attending the University of Colorado Boulder to study history and political science.
Wow.
Hi, my name is Braden. I'm currently a junior, and next year I'm planning on working on my application to my dream school, Notre Dame.
Hi, my name is Shreya Maineni. I'm a senior this year, and next year I plan on attending the University of Southern Indiana to study biochemistry and public health. Our unit advisor is Mr. Fullman, and our wonderful teacher is Mrs. Paternoster.
Thank you. Congratulations, and thank you for all your hard work. Well, that's great. Well, I already did the introduction to the question, so I'll just read it and we'll get started. Okay. Question 2, as I said, when explaining why let me try that again. When explaining why the proposed Constitution lacked a Bill of Rights, one Federalist claimed that, quote, in a government possessed of enumerated powers, such a measure would be not only unnecessary, but preposterous and dangerous, end quote. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Why or why not? In your opinion, did the first 10 amendments to the Constitution sufficiently address the concerns of the Anti-Federalists? To what extent, if any, should we consider adding additional amendments to our Constitution? Begin.
Our unit agrees that the addition of a Bill of Rights to the proposed Constitution was necessary and was not preposterous or dangerous. However, its purpose over time has shifted from initially being a vehicle of ratification to a vital barrier between the government and the people. Although James Wilson believed the addition of a Bill of Rights would be more detrimental than beneficial, without such a document, many states were locked in bitter debates. North Carolina and Rhode Island went further and refused to ratify the Constitution without an included Bill of Rights. Supporters of the Bill of Rights did not believe that state protections were enough to safeguard individual rights and that a federal Bill of Rights was necessary to curb federal power. James
Madison referred to the Bill of Rights as a parchment barrier, but that same barrier has transformed into a powerful instrument for the defense of American freedom. Since 1946, according to Washington University law, almost 20% of all cases heard by the Supreme Court have used citations of the Bill of Rights in their decisions. Although the completed Bill of Rights was referred to as a tub to the whale, it appeased opponents of the Constitution and had an undeniable effect on the development of our country.
While the anti-federal Leviathan, poised to attack the ship of state, was quelled regarding the protection of individual rights, the first 10 amendments were a resounding failure in addressing the main structural concerns of many anti-federalists. These structural concerns included the removal of the necessary and proper and the supremacy clause, along with the new federal power of taxation. While anti-federalists tried to protect from, While anti-federalists tried to protect the states from the new federal power of taxation with requisition amendments, they failed, and states have been at the mercy of federal legislators ever since. In National Federation of Independent Business versus Sebelius, 5 justices stated that the individual mandate was not a proper use of the necessary and proper clause. Furthermore, Congress's use of their spending and taxation power was unconstitutional in this instance because the excessive dragooning put a gun to the head of states.
Anti-federalists were also concerned that state governments would cease to have a purpose under the Supremacy Clause. This is seen with Abelman v. Booth of 1858, in which the Supreme Court unanimously decided that the Wisconsin Supreme Court did not have the authority to annul a conviction made in a federal court. To the Anti-Federalists, this power undermines that of state legislatures and courts when it came to making decisions for their constituents. They knew that the longevity of the new nation would only continue if they actively worked within the system and utilized the amendment process that they helped create.
Our unit believes that the constitutional door should always remain open, and therefore we should always consider adding additional amendments to our Constitution. Amendments to the Constitution serve to correct two primary issues: the recognition and safeguarding of individual rights and structural changes. Under the 9th and 14th Amendments, Congress and the courts have replaced the need for further expansion of individual rights through constitutional amendments by protecting rights enshrined in the 9th and utilizing the enforcement provisions in the 14th. Examples of this include the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, as well as Supreme Court rulings under the 14th Amendment in cases like Obergefell v. Hodges.
However, changes that wish to be made to institutions written into the Constitution should be done so through the amendment process. In 1911, Representative Victor Berger introduced an amendment to abolish the Senate, which would have changed the institutions outlined in Article 1. 2003 saw the Equal Opportunity to Govern Amendment, which repeals the Natural Born Citizen Clause found in Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. Anyone wanting to touch the Electoral College should do so through the process of a constitutional amendment, as opposed to a state compact, seeing as it would only require the approval of 21 states, not the 38 required under Article 5. We are finished with our prepared testimony and are now ready to answer your follow-up questions.
So I want you to talk a little bit about something you said. You said that the Bill of Rights has been a barrier to government attacks on individual government oppression of individuals. But what about the communist cases in the 1950s, right? People who were accused of communism lost rights, lost their ability to hold jobs and things like that. And the Supreme Court never touched it. So was the Bill of Rights really effective in that at that time in protecting rights?
I think the issue comes with the people who were serving in the government under that time. When the founders were creating our government and structuring the different checks and balances in the government, they were relying on the people being elected into government or being appointed to be very civically virtuous. And the issue that we saw in the 1950s with the HUAC investigation and other anti-un-American issues is that people were very fearful of communists and communism within America, and they let this fear into their judgment, and it clouded them and made them very biased when they were making decisions.
Yeah, and I don't think necessarily that the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment truly worked in the way that it could have to protect some of these individuals. But what we see in times of crisis often is that some rights are restricted or things of that nature, like we saw under the Civil War with the writ being suspended. But with the sense of McCarthyism that we saw in the 1950s, there were allegations that these people were in the State Department. So not only was this fear of the Communist Party in America, we thought we were going to be under attack, and we most certainly thought that they were in the American government. So in that sense, the rights that could have protected them may not have been fully utilized because we thought they were enemies of the state at that point.
Let me just push on that though a little bit. I mean, you know, Earl Warren was not a shrinking violet when it came to rights of African Americans. So why was he so bold in this one area and so timid when it came to confronting the rest of the government over the communists?
So the reason that he focused so much on like the rights of African Americans as opposed to the rights of these people accused of communism really comes from the idea that there is no protection in the Bill of Rights against public opinion. There's no need for the government to protect your image explicitly. A lot of these things, like you said, people losing jobs or having their families broken up, that's really just an example of what the public's reaction was to it. These people often weren't being like, or some people were thrown in prison for this, but for the most part, the Bill of Rights is a protection against government overreach, whereas the reaction to communism was mainly a reaction of the populace.
Let's talk a little rights theory. What are the similarities or differences between the British configuration of rights an American configuration of rights?
So the main difference that we can see is that in the British guaranteeing of rights, it was mostly positive rights. So they were so it was worded very like they were giving the rights to the people. But in our Constitution, within our Bill of
Who's the
Rights,
they? Who's the they in your sentence? I'm sorry. Who's the they in your sentence?
Parliament and the King.
Okay.
And then within our Constitution and within our Bill of Rights, there are more negative rights. The founders created it so that the government and Congress, they could not infringe upon our individual rights. And this mainly came from their colonial experiences under Parliament and the British King.
Okay, fantastic. Now let's take it another step. When the court defines, discovers, elaborates, isn't that kind of British? I mean, that's a government kind of telling us what our rights are, or is that not British?
I think it definitely has some British influence, as we see with William Blackstone in his commentaries on the laws of England. We see kind of this configuration of bringing all of the laws together for the first time that we hadn't necessarily seen beforehand. And we have this quote from Jefferson about, if we let Marshall get away with this, the Constitution will be made of wax, right? But there's not necessarily the idea that it shouldn't be made of wax in certain situations, because we're growing. We are not going to always continue to be the small homogenous communities that we once were. So this realization of new rights, I think, is necessary in the sort of democratic system that we have today, even though it may be a little bit British.
Let me ask you something. You've talked about the rights, you've talked about case law involving it. We've talked about the amendments. Are there any rights that you are concerned we may lose because of either the makeup of the Supreme Court or the makeup of Congress? Or are there rights that you wish you had that we maybe don't have?
One right that we are kind of threatened to be losing currently is the idea to a right between the patient and doctor for privacy. And this really culminates in the idea of these recent abortion cases, one from Georgia and one from Texas, that are being seen from a Supreme Court that could actually end up ruling that there is no right to privacy and no right for an abortion within the Constitution.
A right that I would like to be seen added to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, not necessarily the Bill, but to the Constitution, is the right to civic education specifically. It's becoming more and more prevalent that the youth of America are not aware of what is happening within our government or politics. And as we're growing up and getting to the age of where we can vote, people just aren't willing to vote because they don't know what's happening or they don't have interest in it. And I know that for at least for me, the We the People class was very instrumental in creating this interest for me. And a lot of people don't have that same opportunity.
That's pretty cool. Let me follow up on one thing that Abby said. How do we decide when the Constitution should be made of wax and is malleable, and when it is firm and not flexible, right? How do we choose where the Constitution is flexible or not?
Yeah, so a lot of what we see with flexibility in the Constitution revolves around times of war. Some of our most prevalent voting rights amendments have actually been right after war times. So we see letting former Confederate slaves vote, and then the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments after World War I, giving women the right to vote, lowering the voting age so that those who went and fought in a war can then come back and be a part of the democracy. So usually it does revolve around wartime for more social issues.
Let me give you another flexibility type question. Let's say you're in the first Congress, Madison, his Bill of Rights is the 9th and the 10th Amendment only. Is that enough flexibility? Would you have voted for that Bill of Rights? That's pretty wax.
Yeah.
I probably, taking the stance of an anti-federalist, would not have even touched that. If that would have been it, with no rights involved, absolutely not. We do know that many anti-federalists were still hesitant and were still actively fighting against the Bill of Rights, just because there were no structural changes. So I think the push for a second convention would have doubled if that's all that Madison had come back with.
Showed you.
Oh, me?
No, I just said that shows Tim. That's what he gets for
Oh.
asking.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Jack.
So do you think that our Bill of Rights does not include anything in the way of socioeconomic rights, right to a job, right to health care, any of those things? Do you think those should be included in our list of rights? And should they be constitutional amendments?
Yes, because using the necessary and proper clause in the Commerce Clause, Congress has an overwhelming amount of power over basically any form of commerce and anything regarding jobs. So there should be a constitutional amendment or multiple to help protect against those portions of our economy and to protect people's rights.
Yeah, and if we want to take this idea of right to life, liberty, and property, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, this life component, if we want to take that as now and incorporate healthcare into that, I think there is definitely some standing within our history or the history of this country with the right to life and that idea of living happily. We could have some sort of healthcare that hopefully would not go against some sort of necessary and proper and would not dragoon to the point where a gun was to the head of the states, right? So if we want to go with that idea, may I continue my?
Yeah.
If we want to go with that idea, we could definitely get some sort of amendment or a better, hopefully, healthcare system that could fix that for us.
Okay, thank you. Good job. Deep breath, right? Are you guys all done for the day now?
I am, but my two most favorite colleagues are not.
Oh, sadly. Okay. What other units are you in?
Brady and I are also in Unit 4.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck with that. I assume you haven't met yet. No. Okay. Well, I thought your opening statement was good, as we've seen. I think you hit, I think, a very nice point, right? That the purpose of the Bill of Rights has shifted. You know, it's been it was a parchment barrier for some period of time. It failed to address the anti-federalist arguments, but it has become used to be a brake on government's ability to oppress people, and I think that's fine. A couple of things. I asked about the Dennis case and the communists because it's not clear to me that the Bill of Rights was actually very helpful at that point, and that the Supreme Court that was willing to apply other amendments in very effective and dramatically new ways seemed to be just kind of passive with regard to the First Amendment. So obviously that raises this issue of how do we decide, and how much do we leave up to the majority, which the framers weren't necessarily in favor of. They didn't necessarily like majorities all that much. You talk about Blackstone. And there's a very interesting problem with Blackstone, because Blackstone was almost unknown in the United States at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. He only started becoming known after the Constitutional Convention. The Americans were reading Edward Cook, and Cook and Blackstone have very different theories about what the English Constitution is. So that opens a possibility of an interesting discussion. Wouldn't have been appropriate for this, but yeah, Blackstone is well, he's Blackstone. So what can you say about that? But I really enjoyed having this conversation. I thought you guys did a very nice job. You're clearly well prepared, and I hope University of Colorado at Boulder, Southern Indiana, wherever Braden winds up, they're getting a real gem. So I appreciate it. And thanks for having this conversation with us.
Thank you.
I'm not going to go through all your evidence and all that. But there's a thing that really strikes me as very, you have taken risks, and that's phenomenal. First of all, you poke the anti-federalist and call him a Leviathan. I mean, that's a nice turnaround, because they would have said it the other way. When I'm pushing you on this wax concept, you're like, no way, old man. My point is that you're using your knowledge, and you're comfortable to say no, and make a very well-reasoned argument. So as I think about this last 15 minutes, that is the dominant thing that I will remember, that you used evidence quite well, and you used it to make an argument that may not be the most acceptable to many people. So I really appreciated that a lot. I'm just going to sit and ruminate on that experience. And I've enjoyed spending time with you. And as I've said yesterday, you have a fantastic teacher. So enjoy your remaining time with Liz.
You guys blew me away as well. I try to let these very learned scholars who I'm working with today do most of the talking, because I'm just plain old lawyer. I would love to have asked you 2 more questions about civic education. I mean, do you want it to be required, or do you want it to be adequately presented, and at what age? I was thrilled to death. If you were doing that to win us over, you got all 3 of us. I have a theory about all of that, and I'm not permitted to say it out loud in front of all of y'all, but I think it is as necessary or more so than reading and writing. I just really, really believe that with all my heart. And did I hear you say you're going to Notre Dame? Are you the gentleman?
Yeah, my hope is that I go to Notre Dame, but I have no idea. I'm still a junior.
Oh, I'm thrilled for you. That'll be wonderful. That caught my attention when you said it. So, but I loved what I heard today. I agree with them. Y'all didn't take the regular stance that other groups take, and be very proud of what you know and what it's going to be able to do for you going forward. Thank you so much.
Congratulations one
Thank
more
you.
time.
Thank you. And of course, we just wanted to say thanks for coming out and judging all weekend and again today. We really appreciated it.
I do want to say really quick to the judges, I'm in the viewing room and I have not seen them react to 3 people pop on the screen quite like that. So the viewing room was excited to see all of you. Thank you so much for volunteering. It's a
Hello,
pleasure
viewing
to see
room.
you all.